Microsoft 365 is a fantastic solution for most businesses, but I see so many businesses just set it up to be able to use email, files and folders, and Microsoft Teams. What about security? I see so many Microsoft 365 tenancies with absolutely no security applied. So in today's video, I'm going to go over the essential security settings that you should have in place in your Microsoft 365. These are just the basics. There are 13 of them altogether. Now, to follow along with today's video, you will need global admin access into your Microsoft 365. You'll also need to be using a license like Microsoft 365 Business Premium. But before we start all that, let's just have a quick intro. My name is Jonathan Edwards from Integral IT. We help businesses all over the world with their Microsoft 365. Now you can find us at integral-it.co.uk. Now the first setting that we're going to switch off is something called security defaults. Now this might seem a bit counterintuitive, but stay with me. Security defaults are some basic settings that Microsoft think that you should have in place. Now, these are okay if you're a really small business or you don't have professional IT support. But what we're wanting to do is really fine-tune your security settings. And to do this, we have to switch security defaults off. Okay, to turn off security defaults, you need to log into the Microsoft 365 portal as admin. You can see I've got admin access here. So when I launch that portal, something like this will launch. And what we want to do is go down to the admin centers and click on identity, okay? Once that launches, it should launch to identity overview. We then go to properties and we scroll down a little bit, and at the bottom you can see your organization is protected by security defaults, and that is switched on. So we click on there and we want to disable it. It will then ask us why we're disabling it. And the reason is my organization is going to be using conditional access. Okay, we click on save, we click on disable, and that is security defaults disabled. Now that we've switched security defaults off, we can start to secure your Microsoft 365. To do this, we're going to create several conditional access policies. So what's a conditional access policy? Well, as the name suggests, it's a condition of access to your Microsoft 365. Think of this like trying to get into a nightclub. The condition of access for that nightclub might be that you can't wear jeans or you're not too drunk. We can use the same kind of settings in Microsoft 365, just not the jeans bit. So the first conditional access policy that we're going to set up is a requirement for every user who is going to access your Microsoft 365 to have MFA enabled. This is a crucial part of your IT security. How do we set up that policy? Okay, so we're still in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. We want to go to Identity, we want to go to Protection, and we want to go to Conditional Access. And then we want to go to Policies. And at the top here, you can see we can create a new policy, or we can create a new policy from template. Now, Microsoft have created some templates to make our lives that little bit easier. If we just click on there and we go to all, you can see that there's lots of different templates that Microsoft have created. Now there's one here, if we go to Secure Foundation, require multi-factor authentication for all users. So we're going to click on that and we're going to click on Next. Now here's a policy name. Now that policy name is okay. It says what it does. I just like to put an abbreviation at the front, maybe Conditional Access 01, and I'll leave the rest the same. Now, the policy state. Now, this is quite important. If this is a new tenant, if you're a new business, then you can switch this straight to on. If this is an existing tenant and you've got lots of users working, if you switch this on at this stage, it's going to cause a few problems. So we're going to put it in report only at the moment because we want to make a few other changes, which we're going to do later in the video. Okay, once we're in that position, we can click on Create. Now that policy has been created, but remember, it's not switched on at the moment, but we have the policy in place ready. Now by default, anyone from any country can log into your Microsoft 365. That's a lot of people. So a way that I recommend to tie your Microsoft 365 down is to block access from anyone in any country apart from the countries that you and your team operate in. So for example, with our clients in the UK, we block access for anyone outside of the UK. We can also add a filter. So if that CEO wants to go on holiday to Greece with his laptop will still work in Greece. Here's how to do it. Okay, we're still in conditional access. The first thing we need to do here is go to named locations. And what we want to do is we want to put the countries in here that our people work in. So I'm going to call this approved countries. Okay, I'm going to scroll down. So what I'm going to do in here is tie this tenancy down just for UK people. Okay, so I'm going to select UK. I'm going to click on create. Okay, and that's created. I'll just refresh so it appears here. There we go. We have got the approved countries. Okay, next, let's go to policies. Now, instead of a template this time, we're just going to go new policy. We're going to do it the hard way. So go in here. We'll call this conditional access 02 and block access from other countries. Okay, we're now going to assign this to all users. Now, there's a warning here saying don't lock yourself out. Now, let me use this opportunity to say it's always good practice to have an admin account that is excluded from these conditional access policies, okay? Because what we don't want to do is get yourself locked out of Microsoft 365. So what you could do here is include all users, but exclude users and groups, and then select your admin account, which is this one here. So I click on select. So this admin account is excluded from this policy, okay? Go on to target resources. Well, again, we're going to target all cloud apps. And then we've got some conditions, okay? So we're going to leave the device platforms. But in terms of locations, we're going to switch this to yes. Now, we're going to include any location, but we're going to exclude, select here, our approved countries. Because what we're going to do down here is block access. So that will read, we are blocking access to all locations apart from the approved countries, which is the UK. So I hope that makes sense. We'll then go on to client apps. We want to switch this to on, and we'll deselect these. So we're protecting browser, mobile apps, and desktop clients. Click on done. Now we've got some interesting filters that we can add. So let me give you a scenario. You've got a business in the UK. You've got this conditional access policy in place. Your CEO decides he's going to take a holiday in Greece. So he packs his laptop in his bag and he goes to Greece. And guess what? He can't use any of his Microsoft 365. So he rings you up and he says, I'm not happy about this. I can't access anything. So how can we get around this? How can we put a filter in place that keeps the protection but makes travel that little bit easier? Well, this is in this section here. So we'll switch configure to yes, and we will exclude filters devices from policy. And what we'll do here is we'll choose is compliant, operator equals, value true. What does this mean? It means that if the CEO's laptop is in Intune, is compliant, then we will exclude that device from this policy. So it just makes travel that little bit easier. But the devices have to be in tune and they have to be compliant. Click on done. And then we're going to click on controls, because what we're going to do here is we're going to block access. Okay, click on select. Again, what we'll do is we'll report this to on, and we will click on create. So that conditional access policy has been created and it's switched on. So let's continue to create more policies to secure your Microsoft 365. What happens if your business only use Windows devices? Or what happens if they use Windows and Mac devices? Well, we can create a policy to restrict access to your Microsoft 365 for all other types of devices, like Linux and Windows Phone. Here's how to do it. Okay, let's create a policy to block unapproved device types. We're in conditional access again. We'll click on new policy. We'll call this CA03, block unapproved device types. Okay, we're going to assign this to all users. Target resources, again, it's all cloud apps. Conditions, we're going to go to device platforms this time, and we're going to configure. So what are we blocking access to? Well, you can see here we've got Linux, Mac OS, Windows. It's up to you what you run in your business. Windows Phone, Linux, they're good starting points. Is anybody in your business using Linux? Is anybody using Mac and Android? This is usually a good starting point. I know lots of people have Androids and iPhones and things, so this is a good starting point. Block Windows Phone and Linux. Click on Done. Go to Controls here, and we're going to block access for those. So click on Select. Okay, it's wanting to know again if we want to exclude the current user. That's okay, and click on Create. And that one has also been created. The next policy we're going to look at is something to disable persistent browser sessions. What is a persistent browser session? Well, a persistent browser session is when you're signed into Microsoft 365 on the web and you close that web page, it'll keep you signed in. This can be a security problem, especially if people are using personal devices. So why don't we disable it? So when they close the web window, it logs them out of 365. Let's do that. Okay, the next policy here, we'll go to New Policy. I will call this CA04. Okay, again, we're going to assign this to all users. Target resources, all cloud apps. Conditions here, we're going to go to Client Apps. We're going to select Yes, and we're going to be targeting the browser. So keep it like that. Click on Done. And then we go to Session here. And it's persistent browser session, and we're going to set that to never persistent. Okay, select there. That looks good to me. We'll switch that on and click on Create. Now, if you run a business, you will find that most people, most of your team, want to install work applications on their personal smartphones. They might want to check email when they're out of the office or Teams messages. Now, this can be a bit of a security risk. So what you need to do is create something called app protection policies. Now, if you want to know how to create app protection policies, I've got a video on my YouTube channel all about it. But what we can do to enforce these app protection policies for people who want the work apps on their personal smartphones is to create a conditional access policy. That means that they have to use app protection policies. Here's how. Okay, let's create a new policy here. We'll call this CA05, require app protection policy. Okay, we'll assign this to all users. Your target resources here, we're going to click on Select Apps, and we're going to select here. And we're going to choose Office 365. Click on there. Go to Conditions here. We're going to go Device Platforms. Click Yes. We'll select Android, iOS, because this is for people's smartphones. Click on Done there. We're going to look at Client Apps here. Yes. We're going to talk about browser sessions and mobile apps and desktop clients. Okay, click on that. And then we're going to go to Grant Access. And yes, we're happy to grant access. However, we require an app protection policy. Okay, click on Select. Let's do this. Let's create it. That's the next one created. So we are really moving through these policies. Time for another one. Now, there's an older way of authenticating to your business data and your business applications. It's called basic or legacy authentication. Now, on the newer Microsoft 365 tenants, this is disabled by default, but I think you should create a conditional access policy just to make sure. Here's how. Okay, to block legacy authentication, this one's quite easy because we've got a template for it. If we go on to New Template, you can see that that's here. So click on Next. Let's keep our naming convention so it looks nice and neat. Block legacy authentication. I'm going to switch that straight on. It's targeting all users. Quite happy with that. Click on Create. And that policy has been created. Okay, I think it's really good if you have your work computers and laptops in Entra ID. You can create so many policies in Entra ID to be able to manage your work devices. Now, once again, if you want to know about Entra ID and how it can benefit your business, I do have a video on my YouTube channel. But in this video, we're talking about security and securing your Microsoft 365. So it's time for a new conditional access policy. This policy that we're going to create now enforces multi-factor authentication for anyone who wants to add their device into Microsoft Entra. It's worth having. Okay, for this one, we're going to go to new policy. We're going to call this CA07. Require MFA to join to Entra. Okay, let's target everybody there. We will target the resources. This time on here, we're going to click on the drop down and it's a user action. So register or join devices. Okay. And then we're going to go to here and we're going to grant access, but we're going to want multi-factor authentication. Okay. So click on select and switch that to on and click on create. And there we go. So now we've got a good set of conditional access policies in place. Now, if you remember at the start of this video, we created a conditional access policy that meant that everyone in your business had to have MFA enabled. But if you remember, we didn't switch it on. Why didn't we switch it on? Well, the reason we didn't switch it on is because I just want to run through a few other MFA policies to strengthen the security of your Microsoft 365. Unfortunately, the cyber bullies have caught up with us a little bit. Now, some forms of MFA aren't as secure as they used to be. So we recommend that MFA in your business is done using Microsoft Authenticator or a key, like a YubiKey. We recommend that you don't enable SMS or phone call MFA. So I'm going to show you how to choose those settings in Microsoft 365 right now. Okay, so I'm still in Microsoft Entra and conditional access. What I want to do is go down to protection and authentication methods. Here we've got policies here. Now I'm going to go to the Microsoft Authenticator, and at the moment I'm going to enable this and I'm going to set it to all users. So I'm going to leave that as it is. Again, you can exclude users. You can just do it for select groups if you create some groups in Microsoft 365. But for the purpose of this, I'm just going to leave that at all users. I've also got a configure tab, and these are just a few extra features that you can set to further increase the security, things like number matching. What I would do is I would just leave these for now, and I will click on save. Also, the FIDO2 security key, I'm just basically going to do the same here. So I'm going to enable that for all users. I'm going to click on save. And so now I've enabled these strong MFA conditions and I'm targeting all users. So now I've done that, I'm going to go back to conditional access. I'm going to look at my policies and you can see I've got this in report only. So let's get back into here and let's just switch that on and click on save. Okay, so now that policy has been switched on. Okay, believe it or not, we're now on the home straight. What I'm going to show you now is just 4 very small settings that can just tighten up your security just a little bit. Once I've gone through those, we'll jump onto a couple of SharePoint settings and then we're done. Okay, just a few more settings to change here. We're in Entra Admin Center, Identity, Users, User Settings. So what's in here? Well, we've got a setting here, look. Restrict non-admin users from creating tenants, and that is currently set to no. I don't want non-admin users creating tenants, so I'm going to switch that to on. Nice, easy setting. And there's a setting here, restrict access to Microsoft Entra Admin Center. Okay, that means only admins can get in to the Entra Admin Center, which I think is a good idea. So we'll switch that on. Then we'll save those 2 settings there. Now let's go to applications, enterprise applications. Now you can plug lots of different applications into your Microsoft 365. And by default, standard users can install these applications. Again, I think that's worth tightening up a bit. I think these requests to install applications should come through an admin. So what we can do is go to consent and permissions. And you can see here it says allow user consent for apps. All users consent for any app to access the organization's data. That doesn't sound very secure to me. Now, we've got a couple of other options here. We can allow user consent for apps from verified publishers. That's the recommended route. Or an administrator will be required for all apps. I'm a big fan of that one, and I think it should be used. Then down at the bottom here, this is a setting that is due to be removed in March of this year. But at the moment, I'm going to click on Do Not Allow Group Owner Consent, okay? And I will save those settings. Now, finally, let's wrap up with a couple of settings to change in the SharePoint admin. Now, SharePoint out of the box is, what can I say, generous. So what I like to do is just jump in the SharePoint admin and change these two settings. Okay, so we're back in the 365 main admin center. This time we want to go into SharePoint and we want to go into policies and sharing. Now you can see here by default anyone can share any files with anyone, and the people that share files with don't have to sign in. It's quite generous. So I like to set this just one down, and that is guests must sign in or provide a verification code so you can share files with new and existing guests. It just takes away that anyone thing. So I think it's a good setting to have. And then finally, if we just scroll down, choose the permission that is selected when sharing links. So you might share a Word document, and by default, that is set to edit. So whoever you share that with can edit it. Now I like to set this to view. That is the default permission. So it doesn't mean that when you share a file, you can always change it to edit, but by default, it will be set to view. It just saves accidents from happening. And when you're happy with that, you can simply click on save. So there you have it. Those are 13 basic settings to increase the security of your Microsoft 365. Of course, you can do so much more, but I see so many businesses doing so much less. Look forward to seeing you again soon.